What's up, guys? Welcome back to the shop. In today's video, we're going to be working on this little piece of steel. So I was cleaning around my shop, which I know wild, and I ran into this little piece of steel. I don't quite remember where it's from, but looks like I was doing some kind of gradient with it or something. Nonetheless, it's a pretty nice little chunk. It's rusty, but we can grind that out. The plan is I'm gonna cut it in half, restack it, and stack the gradient. That way the gradient goes through. It goes from dark to light, and then it goes from light to dark again. And then we're gonna forge a knife out of it and see what it looks like. Considering twisting it as well, but I'm not sure. I might just forge out a knife like that just to see what the pattern looks like. I think it's pretty good use of this piece of steel. It's probably about 1 inch by 2 inches, give or take. So I think it's going to make a pretty interesting little knife. So let's go on ahead and clean it up and restack it. Let me quickly go over the thought process behind what I'm doing here. I'm pretty much cutting it and restacking it so I can up the layer count. That way it's not so low. And I'm hoping, since it was made in a roughly gradient pattern, I'm pretty sure it just came off of another build I'm working on that will be coming out soon. But I think the piece just didn't make it because of the weird shape. So I decided to leave it out, and I put it to the side, and then it rusted in. Who knows how long it's been there, because I started this project months ago, so it's definitely been there for quite some time. So I figured it'd be a decent little chunk to turn into a nice little utility knife. Overall, the past few weeks I've been working on a lot of projects that don't really require forging. So it was nice to get back to, beating some steel and manipulating the shape. Even though I do the majority with the hydraulic press and I only do the fine tuning with the hammer, nonetheless, it's still nice to be able to, hit some hot steel with a hammer. It's a very, very satisfying, very therapeutic process. As some of you may know, if you're longtime viewers, I don't really plan out my projects, especially something very spontaneous like this. I kind of just start forging a general knife shape, and then I go from there. So in this case, I just pretty much made a point, and as I was working on it, I thought I liked a pretty tall heel, so I decided to make it more of a triangle shape, I guess you would call it, and keep a long heel and then have a nice sharp pointy tip. And that would make this knife very, very good for like cutting meat and carving around meat and stuff, while still being tall enough on the heel if you want to work on, some small vegetables and stuff, and you want to dice up stuff. So a quick question I got for you guys in the audience. Let me know in the comments down below what you think. I was chatting with my brother the other day, and we're trying to figure out, I want to do a batch of chef's knives, and we're figuring out what size I should make them. And I think the pretty standard size is an 8-inch chef's knife, though he thinks something along the lines of 7, maybe even 6.5 would be pretty good. I personally use a 6-inch knife and an 8-inch knife in my kitchen, and I gravitate more towards a 6-inch knife myself, just because it's just not too much knife. It's not like a hassle to do a lot of the cutting process that I need to do. But for cutting certain things, I do like to go towards the 8-inch knife. So I was wondering, what size knives do you guys prefer? What do you use in your kitchen? Do you prefer a bigger knife or a smaller knife for, the majority of your knife cutting stuff that you do? For example, this one is more on the lines of a smaller knife. versus a bigger 8-inch knife. I think this guy ended up being like 5.5, 6 inches. I don't know off the top of my head. Alright, so we are out of the temper. The knife is looking pretty good. Patterns popping out through it. It's pretty interesting to see the patterns start peeking out through the steel, especially after you do the heat treat, the quench part. And overall, it gives me hope that this is going to be a pretty cool looking knife. So here I'm just grinding in my final bevels. I personally like to do my quenches with my knives being pretty thick. Not thick, but kind of thick and parallel, not really grinding in my bevels. That way I can put them into my steel plates and they keep them nice and straight. I know I don't show that part, but I do have some aluminum plates that I use to hold everything nice and straight. And then I just do my bevels afterwards in bulk. Alright guys, so our knife has been hand sanded to 800 grit. We're good to go on there, and we're going to be pairing it with this piece of spalted maple. Has some really nice figuring, especially on this side. So I think I'm going to use this front part ish, yay. Somewhat. Overall, I think it looks pretty good. I'm pairing it with a piece of black curly maple. I think it's going to look pretty good together. So let's go ahead and get all these pieces fitted up and ready so we can bed the tang. That way we get a perfect fit up. For the longest time, I've been struggling with drilling out these holes, especially the very, very small ones that go towards the front of the knife, because they have to hide pretty much all the imperfections. You want it to have a tight as fit as possible, and so it's very, very difficult. Nonetheless, I've been getting better over time, and I like to start with a very small drill bit and start my holes, and then I like to go towards the back and go in with a larger drill bit and relieve the majority of the space. And then I go in with my drill and I connect all the holes, and I'm trying to be very, very careful not to drill towards the sides. I meant sides, not size. I don't know why I said that. Nonetheless, English is not my first language. Then I've learned that it's pretty good, or it's a pretty decent technique to go in and just hot fit the knife tang and just work it in slowly to make sure I have the tightest fit possible. If I had a milling machine, I might not have to go this route, because I can make a very, very, very straight, very, very fine, exact hole, but I don't have those tools, so I have to go this route. Let me know in the comments down below if you guys, how you guys do that if you're a knife maker, and let me know what you think about it if you're a viewer. I always try to keep it towards the bottom portion of the tang. I never like to completely fit it up with the heat, because I want to keep the majority of that tang nice and hard. So what I'm doing here is something called bedding the tang. So I made a rather big relief just so that the tang goes in there without any issues, and then I'm gonna fill it up with epoxy, and I've put wax on the tang so the epoxy doesn't stick. Then I'm gonna put everything together and let it set. That way the knife and the epoxy holds on to the shape of the tang, and after a couple hours, in this case about 3 hours for this particular epoxy, I like to smack it off and it'll leave the shape on the inside. That way we always have a perfect fit every time, and I can reference all my measurements from there without having any wobbling or stuff that could offset everything afterwards. For this particular handle, I kind of decided halfway through grinding it in that I wanted to make it more of a rounder handle. So I ended up knocking in my corners, and then I tried to round it off as best as I could. I wanted to stay relatively oval, but still have the boxy feel to it, if that makes any sense, which I don't think it does. And now we go into our edge and then our coffee edge so that it can darken up and get those nice dark black colors in the 1084. What I'm doing here is something I don't really show often, but on my hidden tank knives, I always like to notch in probably 2 notches on each side of the very bottom. And that is enough for the epoxy to grab onto. Honestly, you could probably just epoxy it without any of that and it would still hold on. This stuff is amazing. You could, if you leave the wax on and you kind of forget about the knife, which has happened to me a lot, you struggle a lot to get it off. I mean, a lot. And that's with wax. So imagine just bare steel. There's really no point in thinking about having the handle falling off. It will not. But these notches are a good insurance nonetheless. So I do that. I know a lot of people like to put a pin in it. I personally don't. If it's a kitchen knife, you're never going to be, knocking it very hard. Maybe if it was a big cleaver, but even then, it's really not necessary. I was very happy with the sharpness of this knife. I like to grind my knives very thin, and so afterwards putting an edge on them is pretty quick. I only go up to 1,000, but 1,000 is a pretty good number for a standard little kitchen knife. Overall, I was very happy with the end result. I think the handle looks great on there with that wood. It has a lot of movement, and overall I like the way the little pattern came out. It's very nice and bold, and overall it's a very nice little kitchen knife that I would like to keep. Nonetheless, it will be for sale on my website if you're interested. And as always, guys, thank you very much for watching. I greatly appreciate y'all, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.